Hello and welcome. I am the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin, your assistant minister, and it might be gloomy outside, but it is a beautiful day inside. Welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church, a liberal religious community where love works. Our mission is to explore the eternal, to nurture community, and build a more just world. Together, we dare to practice and embody the beloved community of all souls. And I want you to know that whether you're with us in person or online, please do take out your cell phone and check in on social media. You can use hashtag CedarLaneUU and hashtag LoveWorks. You're welcome to utilize social media throughout the service. The only thing we ask is that you keep your phone in worship mode. Please know that whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, wherever you are on this life's journey, and whatever your gender identity, beliefs, or immigration status, you are welcome here. A special welcome to those joining us online, whether in the moment or catching up with us later. We're glad you're with us. If you're new to Cedar Lane, we have a small gift for you, so please raise your hand if you're comfortable doing so, and keep it risen so that our ushers can find you. Thank you all for choosing to worship with us today. Everyone is invited to stay after service to enjoy coffee and conversation. Visitors, members, and friends, know that if you choose to use a yellow mug, our friendly Cedar Laners will greet you, because at Cedar Lane, yellow means hello. I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements page, which is an insert in the order of celebration. Reverend Abi and I are going to give you a few highlights about what's happening in this vibrant community.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Our lay pastoral visitors work closely with the ministers to support the pastoral ministry of our congregation. If you have a pastoral need or concern, Phil Smith will be available after the service by the Joys and Sorrows Candles table. Thank you, Phil.
It's cold and flu season, so today I'll be playing the part of Seb and also Norman Allen. Norman is downstairs covering for our religious educators, so please don't be alarmed. Everyone is okay. There's going to be a special young adults convening meeting this Thursday, March 1st at 7 p.m. All young adults in their 20s and 30s are invited to attend, and snacks will be offered.
20s and 30s, eh? That means you and I are out?
We've aged out of that one, that's right.
So if you're a young adult at heart, you can come see us. But for the rest who are in their 20s and 30s, this is a wonderful gathering.
Yeah.
There's a lot of excitement building for next Saturday's combined capital stewardship campaign kickoff luncheon at the Women's Club in Chevy Chase, the place where Cedar Lane had its beginnings in 1951 that we are headed back to on Saturday. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, the Reverend Rob Hardees is unable to be with us. He sends his regrets and apologies. However, I am happy to report that the Reverend Mary Catherine Morn, who is the UUA's Director of Stewardship and Development and Special Advisor to the UUA President Susan Frederick Gray, has graciously agreed to join us next Saturday and be our keynote speaker. So we're delighted that she will be with us, and you will be treated to a wonderful program that the steering team is pulling together. So I want to take a moment to thank members of our steering team, including the co-chairs Don Bliss and Regina Dull, and the many members who have been working very hard on the kickoff event as well as on the capital campaign that will be upon us once we go through the kickoff. So if you're on the team, would you please rise for a moment so we may recognize and thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you. The RSVPs have been so wonderful that I hear that we are beyond capacity, which is in itself a wonderful thing. So we're looking forward to seeing you there.
And there's a bake-off.
That's right.
And
That's
there's
right.
a bake-off. I'm so excited about the bake-off.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you are.
At Cedar Lane, we endeavor to explore the eternal, to nurture community, and build a more just world. But how are we doing in accomplishing our mission and our vision? The senior staff, lifespan education leadership, and membership engagement team have been looking at our vital congregational calendar and asking questions like, what's missing? What will help people grow spiritually, nourish souls, strengthen spiritual practices, and deepen the connection to community? We've been wondering what would fit into busy lives. We also realize that we need the community's help to answer these questions because all programming rises up from this community. This is our polity, and this is also part of our shared theology. It's part of how we live into it. So we're holding 3 sessions in March. Sunday, March 4th at 12:30 p.m., Tuesday, March 6th at 7 p.m., Thursday, March 8th at 10:30 a.m. We're going to have listening sessions. These are for longtime members, new members, friends, and everyone in between. We're going to have some light snacks available, and we hope to engage as many people as possible. Please RSVP to Sarah Davidson, our Director of Communications and Membership Engagement. There's some more details in your insert. So if you didn't catch all those dates, that's okay. It's in writing.
And lastly, we were going to have an all-congregation fire drill today, but due to the inclement weather, we decided to cancel it. You may applaud. We will be coming up with a different date to have this in the near future, and we'll be letting you know, so please stay tuned for details.
Please greet your neighbor. Let us center ourselves with these words from the Reverend Marta Valentin. Pausamos esta mañana del caos del mundo para reclamar la belleza dentro de estas paredes y dentro de cada uno. Ese acarreo es a través de la semana. We pause this morning from the chaos of the world to reclaim the beauty within these walls and within each other that carry us through our week. As Elizabeth Boa kindles our chalice, the symbol of our shared faith, I invite you to please rise in body and or spirit to share in the chalice lighting words that are printed in our order of celebration. We come together as a community of faith, joyful and free. Our individual energies combine to kindle the flame of truth and community. May we each draw strength for the other on life's journey. May the flaming chalice spark in each of us connection and commitment to our liberal religious faith, to each other, and to this broken yet beautiful world. Please remain risen in body or spirit as we sing together hymn number 95, There is More Love Somewhere. Each time we gather for worship, we gather not for our needs alone, but to bear witness to the joys, sorrows, and milestones that unfold in all of our lives, and to serve as companions to one another throughout these profound journeys of faith. We gather to build the beloved community where all souls are welcome and our lives are rendered whole and reconciled. Our hearts are with those for whom parenting is a primary spiritual practice. We hold in our circle of caring those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illness, seen and unseen, with mental illness or addictions, those who have suffered abuse, and those who care for family members in ill health. We hold all in our hearts and prayers. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to others in times of calamity and loss. May these friends of ours, our companions in the world, and all lives, all that lives unspoken in our hearts, be held in the embrace of prayer and silence. I invite you to breathe into this moment with me. I know that it's stormy outside. I know that sometimes life can be really busy, and it's easy to get caught in the storm of busyness. So much so that sometimes we forget that life is happening even in the gloomy weather, even while the busyness is happening. So let us settle into this moment, allowing our eyes to focus out either of the windows or maybe on the wall behind me, or even the flickering flame of our chalice. As we breathe into this moment together, maybe releasing all that has come before this moment, releasing thoughts of what's next in the order of celebration or what's next when we get home. Let us move into this space in between. Right now, drops of rain are falling. And if you can hold an image of them in your mind, know that there is life in each drop of rain. As it touches the earth, it feeds the daffodils, the irises, and the green, growing, glorious world that has been springing up from the moist earth while we have been biking or walking or driving by. Life has been happening. And life is happening in us too. In fact, it is breathing us right now. Precious oxygen being pumped through our blood, feeding our cells that are always regenerating. Life is happening in us. And if you begin to allow your attention to notice the warmth of those who are beside you and maybe behind you, life is happening in those beside us and behind us. Let us rest in this moment of life together. As we enter into the silence, you may remain in this contemplative space. And if you feel called to rise in body or spirit to mourn the loss of a loved one, or if you're remembering the anniversary of a loss, you may do so. Let us enter the silence together. Spirit of life and love, that which breathes us, that which provides rich oxygen to ourselves, and that which causes seeds to burst through even the most harsh bits of earth. Be with us as we move through this week. Open up our senses so we may be aware of life happening even when the busyness seeks to descend. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone.
For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going in the hours between dawns.
Looking inward and outward at once, before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures, like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours.
For those of us who were imprinted with fear like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk.
For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us.
For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive.
And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain.
When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning.
When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion.
When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again.
When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish.
When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return.
And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed.
But when we are silent, we are still afraid.
So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.
We were never meant to survive.
We were never meant to survive.
Stand on the rock
Thank you, members of the choir, Henry and Jasmine, for that powerful anthem. Thank you. And Jeff and Margie, thank you for the beautiful music this morning, both the prelude and now we'll be treated to the offering as well. Friends, for those of you who don't know, Margie is going to be 95 in April. Yep. Thank you. Didn't mean to embarrass you, Margie, but given... Yes, indeed. Thank you. Audrey Lord's A Litany for Survival has filled my mind, heart, and my whole being this past week as I have contemplated and struggled and wrestled with what I was going to say today. As a black lesbian feminist whose adult life spanned the 60s, 70s, and 80s before an early death from breast cancer in the early 90s, Audrey Lorde lived with resilience and grit on the edge of survival, at least by what we can tell from some of her poetry. And in A Litany for Survival, she clarifies for herself and all those who live in those scary and in-between places. We were never meant to survive. Her words, "We were never meant to survive," give me pause. Because we hang on for dear life, don't we? We keep running and running, not knowing sometimes to where or running away from what and who. And we work and work and work to avoid death and sometimes to avoid life. We pretend, and convincingly so, that death and suffering and pain are somehow not connected to life. But we were never meant to survive. Our bodies do not last forever. Our lives do not last forever. So the deeper question is not how to live without pain and suffering, anxiety and tension, tragedy and death, but instead how to live with it, how to live despite all of it. Most people, at one time or another, go through a period of loss and grief, trial, illness, frustration, failure, or what is called a dark night of the soul. And if you are like most people, and I trust that you are, you've gone through several dark nights of the soul. Or you may be in the middle of one right now. You may be dealing with the loss of a spouse, or a parent, or a child. Or you may be dealing with a terminal illness, or a painful divorce, or have a child in trouble, or find yourself caught up in a deep depression, in a tenacious and terrible mood that doesn't seem to want to go away. Or you may be dealing with the heartbreak of living in this world today. Now, many people like to think that the point in life is to solve problems and be happy. Wish it were that simple. Because happiness is usually fleeting and one never gets rid of one's problems. They're there, waiting. If our main interest in life is being happy, we may quickly try to overcome it. But if our purpose in life is to become more of who we are, more engaged with the people and life around us and within us, and to really live our lives fully in the moment, moment by moment, we may discover that a dark night actually provides opportunities to be transformed from within. You know, it's somewhat like Alice looking into the mirror and then going through it. Or like Prince Siddhartha Gautama leaving the palace to find out for himself what the meaning of suffering really is. So how can we go beyond our normal inclination and impulse for the quick fix, to want things to be easy all the time? How do we not hide out in self-delusion or distracting entertainments like binge-watching Netflix? Just can't help confessing. How do we develop and sustain the capacity to stick with something, however difficult or challenging, and in a range of circumstances for a long time? And how do we manage to ride out the storms of life, the ups and downs of it all? In other words, how do we develop and sustain resilience, perseverance, grit? Now, are these terms different or are they the same? Well, there is some differences. Resilience involves the ability to get back up when we've been knocked down, or the optimism to continue when times are tough. Perseverance tends to be associated with a steadfastness on mastering skills or completing a task. Grit is the drive that keeps us on a difficult task over a sustained period of time. But however we choose to distinguish these terms, they all come down to the emotional and spiritual characteristics of living a life of depth and meaning, of engaging with all that life brings and at times dishes out, and living it fully, which is what religion is all about. In the words of the late UU minister, the Reverend Forrest Church, religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. Religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. Or as anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski wrote, religion is not born out of speculation or reflection, still less out of illusion or misapprehension, but rather out of the real tragedies of human life, out of the conflict between human plans and realities. It is what we do when God laughs at our best laid plans. How do we cultivate that spirit of resilience, perseverance, grit? I want to turn to an excerpt from a beautiful little book that you may be familiar with, Wind, Sand, and Stars, by the French poet, philosopher, and pilot Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Now, in his book, Saint-Exupéry tells of an experience of flying at night the route from southern France across the Mediterranean to North Africa with Neri, his radio operator, when they suddenly found themselves far off course and really low on fuel. He writes, "We had no means of angular orientation, were already deafened, and were bit by bit growing blind. Overhead, the sky was filling with clouds, and we flew thenceforth between cloud and fog in a world voided of all substance and light. The ports that signaled us had given up trying to tell us where we were. No bearings was all their message. With sinking hearts, Neri and I leaned out, he on his side and I on mine, to see if anything at all was distinguishable in this void. Already our tired eyes were seeing things, errant signs, delusive flashes, phantoms, and with that we knew ourselves to be lost in interplanetary space among 1,000 inaccessible planets. So flying blind and often in dense fog, not knowing where he was, but knowing he could not make his destination, Saint-Exupéry now began to set his course so he would not have to land on sea. Then suddenly, the airport at Cisneros, their destination, made contact with them. They now knew the direction they needed to follow, although they did not think they had enough fuel to get there. He continues, but the airports, one by one, had been waking each other up. Into our dialogue broke the voices of Agadir, Casablanca, Dakar. Bit by bit, they were gathering round us as round a sick bed, and suddenly into this conclave burst Toulouse, the headquarters of the line 3,000 miles away, without a word of greeting, simply to say sharply, "Your reserve tanks are bigger than standard. You have 2 hours fuel left. Proceed immediately to Cisneros." Which is what Saint-Exupéry and his radio operator did eventually and landed safely. Now, the story offers us a few helpful pointers. To begin with, our reserve tanks are bigger than standard. Our inner resources are often greater than we imagine them to be. We have reserves we seldom draw upon and often don't realize exist, but they are there. And I have seen this happen again and again in ministry, encountering people and lives where people draw on their deep inner resources. I'm reminded of a memorial service I did for a member a few months back who was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer for 18 years, but chose to live her life with courage and grace and grit and cheerfulness, determined to live as well and as full as possible until the very end, caring for her family, running marathons, doing community work, starting a foundation to support cancer research, living every moment fully. She was drawing on deep inner resources. And I think of another member who suffered a debilitating stroke, but strove hard with grit and resolve to overcome those challenges, to live life fully and well for the few months he had after the stroke. Now, some people would say they were strengthened by the power and grace of God, and others would insist that they were simply drawing on their own resources. Whatever be the source, we're not going to get into a theological debate about this. We can recognize and acknowledge a deep reservoir within each of us from which emanates strength and courage in times of crisis. And we just need to remember that. Second, we sometimes tend to operate with assumptions that interfere with our ability to see and sort out problems and crises in our lives. Saint-Exupéry, for example, imagined that there was less fuel than there actually was, or that they were farther off course than they really were. Sometimes it's the same with us. We think we're not good enough, that we're not worthy enough, or that things will never improve for us, ever. And in those moments, it is important to remember that there is more than less. There is more to us than less. Third, even though Saint-Exupéry was not sure where he was or how he was going to get to his destination, he continued flying in the hope that he would find the right course. And sometimes that is the best that we can do too. In a difficult situation, unsure of where we are or where we are going or how we will get there, we do not have to give up all hope. Rather, we can continue to steer our course in the best way we know, in the hope and faith that it will soon become clear that we will get through the crisis somehow. Sometimes all we can do is hang in there with very little faith, very little hope, but with just enough that we don't have to give up on ourselves completely. And at such times, it is really important to be able to draw upon our liberal religious values and faith that human life is sacred and worth living despite everything that we encounter, that we are loved, that we are enough as we are, that our life and our work are enough, that there are resources within and around us which will sustain us and see us through, and that we are not alone. Which brings me to the next resource, a caring community. Saint-Exupéry was saved by the efforts of other people who finally succeeded in making contact with him. In times of personal crisis, we need the help of others, and we need to depend on others, because few of us can get through without help from others. Freedom-loving individuals we may be, but we don't have to face our demons alone. Individual perseverance, of course, is highly prized in our culture. We've all heard the platitudes, pull yourself by your own bootstraps, or if at first you don't succeed, then you try and try and try again. Now, our Unitarian Universalist faith sometimes plays into this heroic form of grit, this hype. When we proclaim especially that the human spirit is not only inherently worthy, but that it is also inherently resourceful. And yet, at our best, we are more nuanced. We recognize that perseverance is not just an individual experience, but one that happens within groups, in a family, among friends, in a congregation, among people who share an identity subject to oppression and prejudice. And at our best, we affirm that we can do it, and we do not have to do it alone. When my family went through a deep crisis of life-altering proportions 3 years ago this weekend with our older son, we were companioned, held, and sustained by the love and unconditional support of our family, of friends and colleagues, and this religious community. When we were feeling completely overwhelmed, not knowing what was going to happen, it was that love and support that not only kept us going, but held us together. That we realized we did not have to go it alone, nor that we were not alone. So building perseverance in community is sometimes a spiritual practice that we need to cultivate more intentionally. Consider the Jewish tradition and its holidays of telling and retelling stories of its people's survival, endurance, and redemption. What a powerful catalyst for creating perseverance in community. So grit, perseverance, resilience have a lot to do with what is inside us, but they have even more to do with what is between and among us. The true path of perseverance is the path of connection that leads to deeper community. That's what a beloved community is all about. We continue to journey through the dark only when we sense we're not alone. Internal grit only gets us so far. Empathy, presence, and that love that will not let us go or let us down often gets us the rest of the way. And then there are a couple more things. It helps to carry a sense of humor and not get too earnest about all this. too preoccupied to really miss the forest from the trees. I'm reminded of my dear colleague and mentor, the Reverend Frank Robertson, who in his later years was diagnosed with intestinal cancer. And for 2 years went through a round and round of chemo treatments every week, which was horrendous. And one day, as he was waiting for the treatment, he turned to the nurse who was strapping an IV on his arm and said to her, "You know, one needs to have a sense of tumor about this thing." One needs to have a sense of tumor. And the other one, there is something that's not always evident, or is at times even countercultural, counterintuitive. It is the power of letting go. As my colleague and former Cedar Lane minister, Reverend Douglas Taylor, reminds us, perseverance does not mean permanence. It is more about growth, and growth is about change, about letting go of something in order to be reborn to something else. He writes, to persevere, we must let go of what is in favor of what will be. Whether we speak of making the world a better place and the perseverance needed to keep at the work, or we speak of sorrow and heartache and the perseverance we need to continue to hope and to love and to reach out. Those who persevere have learned to let go of expectations, of judgment, of ego. So in order to persevere, we need to learn to let go. Let go of expectations, specific outcomes. Let go of fear, of failure, or sorrow, or heartbreak. Let go of our egos. One of the hardest things to do. I'm reminded of those powerful lines from Mary Oliver's In Blackwater Woods. To live in this world, one must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. And so, my friends, that's my hope for all of us, that as individuals and as a religious community, we will not only discover what it is that we love in our lives, what it is that we cherish deeply, but to love that fiercely, while at the same time learning to let go. Let go of things, of habits, of unspoken norms and expectations that hold us back, hold us down from being all that we are and can yet be. And to do that, to cultivate the spiritual practice of perseverance, grit, resilience. So may it be. Blessed be.
We've reached the time in our service where we celebrate the gifts we have in our lives and we share them with our community. So far this year, your generosity of time and treasure has supported programs that have helped us to feed a women's shelter for an entire week. We have influenced the county to take on a much more stringent climate change policy. Our Action in Montgomery partners have continued to help create systems that provide free after school. We have built an apartment in the Chalice House. We are ready to offer a person or family in need sanctuary. We have support programs for parents that are weathering the storm. These are just a few of the ways in which your time and your treasure is making a difference within these walls and in our wider community. So I invite you to please give generously, and if, like me, you only ever bring your cell phone to church, you may text CLUUC and an amount to 73256. Today's offering will now be gratefully received. For the gifts which we have received and the gifts that we are, may we be grateful. May we be committed to using these gifts to bless the world, to increase love and justice, to embody beloved community, and to be grateful and glad for every blessing that comes our way.
Please rise in body and/or in spirit. For these closing words from W.E.B. Du Bois, whose 150th birthday we celebrated on Friday, February 23rd. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done and not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. So let's go in peace, go making peace, living gently, loving mightily, bowing to the mystery, while singing, I am on my way to the freedom land.
So here we go. I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
to the freedom land.
to the freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way. Great God, I'm on my way. Sister Ann, come and go with me. Sister, come and go with me. I ask my sister, come and go with me. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. I ask my brother, come and go with me. I ask my brother, come and go with me. I ask my brother, come and go with me. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. One more time, I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way.